Welcome to The Thriving Mama, the podcast that teaches you not just how to survive, but to thrive in motherhood. I'm your host, Dr. Stephanie Davids. Today, in honor of the month of February and Valentine's Day, we're going to talk about self-love. Self-love is something I think we hear a lot about. We hear about self-care, but really, what does it mean to really love yourself? And I was a facilitator for a group that I'm a part of. I don't lead it, but I am one of the people who facilitates. I was there and we asked this question to the audience and we got so many different answers. And so I felt compelled to dive into it with all of you. And so today we're going to talk about, what does real self-love look like? How do we dishonor ourselves when we don't love ourselves and listen to ourselves? And some easy ways you can incorporate self-love into your life. If you're curious as to if you have any stored emotions or trauma that might be causing your illness, preventing you from achieving your goals and dreams, or even just showing up as the best, most authentic version of yourself, I invite you to take my free Stored Emotions and Trauma quiz, and you'll find that link in the show notes. Like I said, I was asked to be a facilitator for this discussion on self-love, and it got me thinking, what did that mean to me? It was really fascinating to hear all of the ladies who were in the group talk about their versions of self-love. But by and large, I would say it got back to the same core principles for most of us. When it gets down to it, it really is about accepting who you are, like all of the parts of yourself. We all have light and dark inside of us. We all have lots of parts of ourselves. We all have life history, that some of that history is good and some of it's not so good. And that's okay. And we have our inner child or some of the inner children and the wounded parts of us, the parts of us that are vibrant and happy. There's all sorts of parts and layers to us. For me, and what I heard in that audience was so many people saying that true self-love is knowing that there are all those parts and still loving yourself. For me, I felt like that was layer one of it. And I totally agree. I've had some experiences in my life, and I feel like you need to forgive yourself for things that you did when you were either stressed out or in a bad situation, or you just didn't know what to do. Or sometimes we just react. We react instead of, I always say, like taking a breath, getting yourself into the moment. There's so many different ways that we make mistakes. And a lot of times we hold on to those and we judge ourselves for those. And that should not be the case. You can make amends. You can apologize. You all know I'm a big fan of forgiveness, forgiving yourself and forgiving other people. And that does not let anyone off the hook for what happened. It just releases. It's an energetic release, right? It releases you from all of the kind of the shackles that hold us in that moment. So for self-love is really, like I said, starts off is the true acceptance of all of those parts. And I will say for most of us, it takes a long time to get there. It's not like you just wake up one day and you're like, oh, I forgive myself for being mean to my siblings and an ex-boyfriend or an ex-girlfriend or whatever, the things that I did to them. Because you know what? We all have life history. We all mature. We all get older. And I'm hoping that most of us take accountability for our actions, self-responsibility, because that is a part of self-love. But yeah, we've all done stuff and it's okay. Just the important thing is that we learn from those things and we don't keep on repeating those things, because if that's the case, then that's something that needs to be addressed. But most people, we make mistakes and we need to forgive ourselves for those mistakes, but also love all of the positive and love the positive and the darkness. I truly believe that most humans have a lot more positive than they do have positive and light than they do have dark, but it's in varying degrees in all of us. And that's totally okay. That is what makes us human. And it's also human to feel all the feelings. And so that's the first step. We talk about accepting ourselves. And like I said, easier said than done, takes a very, very long time. I've been doing the self work for 13 plus years, and there's still little things that creep up into my consciousness. And I was like, I didn't know I thought that or felt that way. So that's the first level. Then the second level of what real self love looks like is, what are your beliefs? What is your self-talk? Do you know your boundaries? All of those things. So beliefs, I've got a whole episode on beliefs, and I have a whole episode on boundaries. So you guys can feel free to go back and check out those episodes on beliefs and boundaries where we dive into it. But on the surface level, beliefs, what are these core foundational ideas that have led you through life? Those beliefs often lead to our mindset. And many times we have limiting beliefs. When I was in this discussion the other day, we asked the audience, what is a limiting belief that's holding you back? Understanding those is also huge. That awareness of what are these things that might be preventing me from truly loving myself? Because that's where a lot of it, the rubber meets the road, that self-love piece of it. If you're holding on to a belief that I'm not worthy, I don't deserve love, I don't deserve X, Y, or Z, or I'm not worthy of X, Y, or Z, that's not loving yourself. So that's something that you need to get to the root of. And then those beliefs, they often set the tone for our self-talk. I would encourage you to do an exercise that I have people who work with me do a lot of times, is like, throughout a day, are you talking to yourself in a negative way or a positive way? What's going through your mind? I will have people for an hour or even a full day get out a little piece of paper and like make a tally mark every time they have a negative thought, or write down what that negative thought about themselves is. That would also creep into, do you have negative thoughts in general about the world most of the time? That means that you probably do have a general negative self outlook too. So something else to make you investigate. Self-talk is a really important one of those. It's an important thing for us to look at. And you can do that. Like I said, you could do that exercise on your phone. You could do that exercise on a piece of paper. But when you do that, instead of, what you can do really quickly or like the next day, is any of those things where you say, I can't, or I'm not, or I don't, or I should or shouldn't, or I have or haven't. Flip that around into an empowering or a positive belief. So you can start creating more positive self-talk. That's super, super easy to do. If you're like, oh, I can't run a mile. So that's an easy one. You'd say, I can run 500 feet. And the next day I can run 600 feet. And the next day I can run 700 feet. That's a super easy way to do that. Also, when you are thinking like negative thoughts, especially if you're thinking negative thoughts about other people, another thing could be like, oh, why is that person doing that? Why are they driving that way? Or why are they behaving that way? You could think instead, what's that person going through? Empathize with them, because then the more we show love to other people, we're going to show love to ourselves. So, I wonder what's happening for them in this day to make them behave like that, or just send them love. Be like, I'm energetically sending you love. There's lots of ways we can do that, but then it reflects back to ourselves. So that's another thing. And then boundaries. Understanding yourself and what your needs are is imperative to self-love, because if you have no boundaries, people are going to walk all over you. And so understanding those boundaries. And if you're a person who sometimes thinks that I'm ignored, or people don't see me, or people don't hear me, or you say yes when you want to say no, or you're putting other people's needs in front of you, that means you've got some self boundaries to work on. And that means there is some self-love work that needs to happen. But the first step is getting clear on what those boundaries are. What are you willing to accept and deal with? And what are you not? What's a no-go for you? What is an absolute hard stop? No, you're not going to do this stuff. So that's another thing that I work quite a bit with people on, is the boundaries. And boundaries start with what are your values and core beliefs? When your core values and your beliefs, it gives you a template from which to work with on establishing your boundaries. If somebody asks you to do something you don't want to do, say no. And if you can't practice in the mirror. Those are all ways that you can get over that. Those are all things that work into self-love. Self-love first is acceptance. Self-love is having a generally positive mindset most of the time. Obviously, negative things are going to happen, but when you have a good amount of self-love and grace with yourself, you realize that those are things that you can fix. There's a knowing, or I don't even want to say fix. Fix is sometimes the wrong word. Those are things you can address and change, right? And so that's another kind of piece of the puzzle. Like I said, the self-talk is huge, being positive with yourself. Boundaries, knowing those core values and the beliefs so you know when to say no, or when somebody is trying to force a view or a situation on you, you can say, no, that's not for me. And you're honoring yourself. And that kind of leads me into the next point is, how do we dishonor ourselves? Because that's where I find a lot of people get stuck in the weeds. Like they think they have all these boundaries and beliefs, but I'll see in their lives when we're in sessions and we're talking, and they're dishonoring themselves. Well, because they're like, some people are like, I was at a party and everyone was eating this stuff and I know it's not good for my body, but I still ate it anyways. So that's a way to dishonor yourself. Another way to dishonor yourself is, we just said, saying yes when you want to say no. We want you to come out for a night on the town and you're too tired and you just don't like alcohol and you don't want to be around that. Saying no is important to that. But when you say yes, you're dishonoring yourself. And that builds subconsciously. So the more you do that, the less you have boundaries and you're not staying true to your beliefs and your values, the more dissonance and dysregulation you're going to have in your body. And that's the opposite of self-love. And so it's interesting because we live in this, so much of it gets into like basics. It's like self-respect, self-growth, self-care, a lot of these things. And most of us were not modeled that. I recently wrote an article for a virtual publication, a virtual magazine on self-love as a legacy. And we did it because most of us weren't modeled that. I can remember in my life, most of my parents and my grandparents just working hard. The word that came to mind for me was sacrifice. Lots of sacrifice, not a lot of pleasure, joy, happiness. And then my dad, I remember him, like, he's always been into like working out and like health related stuff. So I saw self-care from him there, but I can't think of many other instances of that. It's really modeling that for our children, if you have children, relatives, just people in the world, incorporating self-love into your life and what that looks like. It can look so many different ways. I feel like self-care is such a buzzword now. It doesn't have to look like doing a sauna and listening to just restorative music and meditating and this and that. It can be lots of different things. It could be having a little morning ritual. It could be getting up in the morning before everyone else and having a cup of coffee and sitting down with a book or sitting down to watch the sunrise. That's self-love. Saying no to things you don't want to do is self-care and self-love. Prioritizing yourself, like how to incorporate, there's easy ways we can do it moment to moment in daily life. When I'm working with people, I tell them they need to do one thing for themselves every day, whether that's like grabbing 5 minutes to have just clear their mind and quiet and just breathe and exist without any demands for 5 minutes. They could do that. Getting a workout in, taking a walk, having that ritual and doing it every day without fail, journaling. There's so many things. For some people, you obviously need to fill your own cup first, and then the overflow goes to everybody else. Make sure that your cup is full, and then you can share with other people. For some people, self-love is actually doing kind acts for other people. So I know some people who really they love to volunteer at animal shelters, and that brings them so much joy. that's amazing because it's benefiting them and it's benefiting these animals that are in need. There's so many ways we can incorporate self-love into our lives, but so much of it is just honoring yourself. One woman I was speaking to at the event that I was at where I was facilitating, she had mentioned how she had a passing in her family recently, and just self-love was giving herself the space to grieve. And that's huge. And grieve the way like honoring her authentic grieving process, not what other people think it should be. And it was awesome to hear that because I have family members who think it should look another way. They don't like it when I cry in public or this, that, and the other thing. You know what? That's awesome. That's like the ultimate self-love, especially going through grief. So it can look many different ways, not just what you hear or see on social media or in publications or anything like that. There's lots of ways to do this. So what I encourage you to do is to pick, if you're not doing something already, is to pick one thing and to be consistent with it, right? Or pick a time of day. That's your timeout time where you tune out or you work on yourself. If you're like me, I do best when I kind of block things out or schedule things for myself, because if I don't, then I'm not intentional in my day and things start to get away. So that's something that I actually do. In the morning, I block out a ritual time. And then in the afternoon is when I work out. And if it happens at other times of the day, that's just great. That's gravy on top. So I would encourage you to just pick one thing or one time slot and honor yourself with that. Try to do it every day for a month. If you can do it every day for a month, it will become a pattern and it will be something that you can hold on to and use to fill your cup and regenerate yourself and really love yourself. And I would leave you with this. If hearing this sparked any thoughts in your head about your beliefs, your boundaries, your self-talk, or awareness of things that might be detracting from your self-love, write them down, like journal them out or write them down on a piece of paper and start thinking about how you can change them, because that's one of the first steps is just awareness, which I think I talked about in the episode before, but then also just starting to take action. Once that thought is there, you can start to take action on it and do something that feels right, what resonates with you on how you can address it and then make it so that instead of going away from self-love, you're going more towards self-love. And self-love at its core is self-worth and believing in yourself and really accepting and loving yourself. So it's moving you in that direction instead of away from it.
If you made it this far, I truly appreciate you. Remember, knowledge is just the beginning. Taking action is what truly sparks change. If you're overwhelmed and don't have enough energy to make it through the day, I invite you to book a free 20-minute coaching call with me. It's a no-obligation chat where we can discuss your health goals and how I might be able to help you achieve them. Visit the link in the episode description to book that call. Until next time, keep striving for wellness and remember, you have the power to not just survive, but thrive in motherhood.